Hey everyone, today I want to share a story with you, and it's a story of a very intelligent man who moved to Germany from India. And he built a very successful career here, but somehow he couldn't figure out how to make his personal life work and find the right partner. And yeah, he ended up moving back to India because of that. And there are some pretty sad details in the story. It's obviously just an individual case. It's a guy that I met somewhere. But I think this story actually showcases a lot of more common, more fundamental problems that immigrants face, and especially Indian men face in the modern Western world. And I also think that this kind of stuff happens more often than you think. No one likes to talk about this kind of stuff, it usually stays in the dark. But as you know, on this channel, we do talk about things that most other people just don't talk about. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Achil Rudolf. I'm a social confidence coach, and for the last few years, I've helped predominantly Indian men develop the kind of confidence that is needed to just go out into the real world and meet amazing people in your everyday real life. And I actually built a habit of just talking to people whenever I feel like there could be an interesting connection. And I used to do this in the dating context because when I was single, I was very grateful for opportunities to meet attractive women. But ever since I entered a relationship and started focusing more on business, I actually do this now more for business connections and even for clients. So if you know me, if you hung out with me at any point, you know that sometimes in the middle of whatever I'd be doing with my friends, I would just go off and say hi to someone because I feel like that might be a valuable connection. And I've made that a habit at this point. So every now and then I see someone and I think, hey, this could be an ideal client for my coaching business. And then I just go up to that person, and I've actually gotten clients that way. And that happened a few years ago where I saw this person and I started the conversation with him, and he seemed really nice. He immediately opened up about his life, and I told him that I specialize on the situation of Indian men who moved abroad recently and want to still find the right partner. And he immediately told me that this was a big problem for him. So I was very optimistic about this person becoming a client, and I was quite excited about that option. So I talked to him about it. I said that we should stay in touch. And he said, yeah, he'd be happy to talk about it, but right now he's busy. He said, right now I have to go and I have to see a prostitute because I came from a different city to Berlin just to meet a prostitute. And that really struck me. I mean, people usually don't talk about this. Indians certainly usually don't talk about this. And he was so open about it. I knew that he trusted me enough to open up like that, which is very endearing. And I didn't really have experience with people or potential clients who were in this kind of situation. So I was also quite curious. So we stayed in touch and we started messaging each other. And I remember I just reached out to him. I'm going to share this here on my screen. And I asked him whether I can use these chats that I had with him as supporting material for this video. So this is all happening with his permission. He will be completely anonymized though. Let's call him Abhishek for this video here. And he opened up also on the chat quite quickly about his loneliness, saying that he has depression and anxiety and feels very alone on a 3-week alone holiday. And so we started talking about that potential collaboration, coaching project. But when I brought that up, he had some other concerns. So he said, actually, I think I'm too old for dating. And then again, he was very blatant with his language here, and he said just sugar babies, OnlyFans, and dot dot dot. Quick fixes is all I need. All I'm getting now is women with kids or divorced. LOL. So at this point, I was very surprised because I know that this man was just 33 years old. But this is something that often happens with Indian men, and I was in that situation as well. When they cross this 30 threshold, they start thinking that it's too late. And in this case, it got worsened by the fact that he was probably using online dating. I'm not even sure about this, but if you go online as a 33-year-old man and you don't have a lot of confidence and you don't have a lot of, let's say, contact with the other gender, and you don't really know how to date in the West, then yes, you're probably not going to find the kind of people that you would like to date or marry. And what then happens is naturally you just give up on dating, because online dating in a way is the only option that's presented to you. And that's what everyone else is doing. And if that doesn't work and you just don't get compatible partners there, you turn away from dating. And that happened in this man's case as well. So for a few months after this, I couldn't really get a hold of him because he said, I don't want to date. I just want to focus on my career. And you have to know, this guy was extremely successful. He's managing some unit in a big corporate, and he's winning prizes for his work. But obviously, at some point, you can't just go without human connection, without intimacy. And at the age of 33, he still had urges. And so it turned out then that he started going to prostitutes again. And I talked about it with him, and it became very clear that he just accepted that. Instead of meeting me in Berlin as I had planned, instead of coming and having a conversation with me, he ended up going to prostitutes whenever he was in Berlin. So we never really met again after that. And then he said, hey, I changed my principles. Women are like drugs. I rather have it that way. I get to decide which drug I want, when I want, where I buy, and dosage control. And then he also added another negative experience that he had made with a woman who he was into, and somehow it didn't work out, and then she started ignoring him, and he was extremely hurt by that. Obviously, when you enter the dating world as someone who's not very acquainted with the local customs and with how to present yourself and how to find the right partner, and you make a couple of really bad experiences, you're just gonna be turned off by the whole thing. And that's what happened in his case. So he turned away from it completely, started forming certain beliefs about dating not being for him because he's too old, because the women here are kind of weird. But that was just based on a handful, maybe 2 or 3 experiences. And so at this point, he just says, I'd rather go to prostitutes. In fact, at some point, he told me he's just accepted that for him, that paying for women is his type. Nothing is free in life, and that he's just into prostitutes and not even into women. That was when I decided that I don't really want to continue this conversation anymore, and I kind of gave up hope on this person. And at this point, you can imagine how screwed up his vibe, his attitude is. You can imagine that all the women that he meets now are basically pay to give him affection, and they're certainly not the kind of woman that he would consider as a partner in the long run. So now this whole thing really exacerbates. Now he's going into a downward spiral where he gets more and more confirmation for his belief that women in the West are not even suitable for him. He expressed this again in another message a little bit later, where he said, hey, I don't even know if I should be dating someone here because women in the West, they might just leave me after 3 years. He says it's like leasing a model rather than buying a car. And so at this point, he just decides to go back home, packing bags, permanently India. I need friends, family, warm-hearted people, the whole package. So, India. That was the final blow. And it's an extremely complex topic. I don't want to simplify this, and I don't want to make it seem like the world was harsh on him or anything. It's still ultimately his responsibility. But with his particular cultural setup, it was easy for him to fall into this trap, quote unquote. And it's not just a problem for Indians, obviously. It's not just a problem for people from other countries. It's also a problem for locals in the West that prostitution and porn are quite easily accessible alternatives, and they can easily lead you to just giving up on dating. And for most people, it's porn that draws them in and draws them away from even pursuing partnership and real connection. But if you have the money, then oftentimes it ends up being prostitution. And again, this happens more often than you think. For people with a different cultural background, that's just an additional difficulty that's added on top of the regular difficulty of finding a partner and the regular temptation of going for the quick fixes. If you are from a different culture, you have a harder time, obviously, adjusting to the local dating culture. But here's also the key, the solution to this whole dilemma, I believe. It's that you certainly don't have to move back to India to find warm-hearted people. You can find warm-hearted people here. There are warm-hearted people, I can guarantee you, but you have to find a way of dating that works for you. And the standard way of dating that you're presented with, that everyone else uses here, might just not work for you. For example, if online dating doesn't work for you and you don't find compatible people there, then why restrict yourself to online dating? You will notice very quickly that when you go out and meet people in the real world, you can meet a very different set of people. If you don't like the short-term hookup culture of the West, then you can make it very clear that you are not interested in that, and you can own that, and you can go out into the world and make that as your offer, and you will find people who really appreciate that, who are also not at all happy with the cold, more short-term and hedonistic dating culture in many places in the West. Yes, it might be a little bit more difficult. There might be a little bit fewer people who are compatible with you here than maybe back in India, but there's still enough. Because ultimately you don't need a lot of people. The averages don't really matter. Because you only need ultimately one. But all of this obviously requires a lot of leadership and independence, mental independence, because you're gonna have to do something that most other people don't do. You're gonna have to go offline and present yourself as more of a long-term partner, which might not be the norm in your area, in your environment, in your friend circle. And it's a bit more difficult as an immigrant to be a leader like that and do something against the grain, because you're still adjusting in many ways to the environment, and it is already quite difficult to just arrive, fit in. But then you have to be very clear that in some areas you just don't want to fit in. In some areas you want to adjust, you want to learn and assimilate, but in some areas you want to just stay exactly who you are. And in some other areas you want to import something completely different that's neither who you are nor what's lived in the local culture. You want to see a better solution and implement that. And if you need help with this, I'm very, very glad to be in touch. I see already a few comments here. I put a link into the description where you can see how I help people in this situation, and we can arrange a call where we can talk one-on-one. I also am starting a new community just now where I enable people of the South Asian origin, especially men who live abroad, to connect and get a bit of free video course content that I put out there to help people in this situation learn the first steps of how to become confident in that way, where you can go out and meet people offline. If you want to get that, simply shoot me a comment on my Instagram ideally, or a DM on my Instagram, and I'll send you the link. I will also be putting that link into the description of this video down below, so that's the easiest way for you to get it. With that, let's already conclude this live stream here today. It's actually my first live stream. Thanks a lot for joining, everyone, and have a great Sunday. Bye-bye.